Hello, and welcome to Property Matters, a weekly look at all matters property designed to be of interest to anyone who has an interest in property. And Property Matters is supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. As you know, each week we focus on the property stories that are making the news, and we'd love you to get involved by adding your comments and thoughts in the comments section wherever you're watching us below this video. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so that you get automatic notifications of when we go live. You can also email us, the address on the screen there, propertymatterstv@gmail.com. Joining us as always, and looking bright-eyed and bushy-tailed this Sunday morning, it's Joe Joshi. Morning, Joe.
I'm not sure about the bushy tail, but yes. Good morning, everybody. Good morning to our viewers. Very happy Sunday morning. The news in the media at the moment is all knives out for Boris. But we are here on property, and we love to talk about property. Property is all that really matters. Boris in or out, it really is irrelevant. Because people want to buy homes, people want to buy a house, people want to have their dream home, and I think that's the best subject that is on the table. But this time, Sunday morning at 10 o'clock with Paul and me, of course.
Absolutely, and it has been true that the news has been dominated with the Boris story, so there hasn't been a lot of property news in the actual mainstream media, but there's been plenty going on, and this is an interesting report that's just come in. This is from getagent.co.uk. They're basically saying, what is it that people would pay as a premium to get a chain-free property purchase? And the suggestion in the survey is that people are willing to pay nearly 11% more on average. That's £25,000 in the current market for a chain-free property acquisition. So basically what they did, they analysed the sales of 19 major cities in the UK, they suggested that Edinburgh came out the highest, where people were prepared to pay up to £75,000 more for a chain-free property in the Scottish capital. And then it was down to places like Nottingham, Liverpool, Sunderland, Portsmouth, Southampton, London, Newcastle, Leicester and Swansea, which, as you said earlier to me before we came on air, all university towns, which may be a coincidence, who knows. But there definitely seems to be a willingness to get a chain-free property purchase. And what the survey goes on to say, Joe, is that this has probably been exacerbated by the fact that during the pandemic, of course, the actual conveyancing took so long to do. So anything to speed that process up was welcome.
Yes, I mean, historically, throughout my life as an estate agent, chain-free properties have always been much, much more desirable. And there are journeys that have taken place in that where companies have set up to provide chain breaking systems. So in other words, they would rather go and buy a property out and then sell it on, and primarily because they could actually get a premium for a vacant property, and that is based on the fact that the amount of man hours it actually takes our archaic system to actually get a property transaction concluded, and time is money, of course, and I think that's what it really boils down to. So when people want to move, they would much rather have a vacant property or a chain-free property to buy, because there's always that threat of a chain breaking and you going back to starting all over again. When buying a property and buying a home as opposed to a house, and I'll define that one more time, a home as opposed to a house is something that you set your heart on. You walk through that front door, and within about 10 seconds, you know whether you want to live here or you don't. And once you've set that and you've gone through that whole motion of looking around properties, doing all the viewings that you want to do up and down the country, the time and so forth, and then you step into a place and you think, okay, this is nice. I really can see myself living here. And that is a chain, and then that chain breaks. Not does it only break the chain and break the whole system, it actually breaks your heart, because you've set your goals on that part as a home, and you've decided, especially if you're a young couple that are setting out into the world, and you decide that this is where you want your sofa, this is how you have your TV, this is the lounge, blah blah blah, all of that sort of stuff goes in. You start to have that emotional tie to a property, and then it's broken. It's broken primarily either because the seller has changed their mind, or the one that the seller was buying has changed their mind, or the one that the seller's sellers were buying has changed their mind. And that's how the chain reaction happens. And especially for first-time buyers, it's a real problem because obviously there's the cost involved, Paul. The cost involved in having surveys done, having the searches done again, and going through the whole emotion, having maybe even to redo your mortgage because that mortgage approval was for that specific property. So you've got to go back to square one and start again. So though there are many, many reasons why people prefer chain-free properties and why they would rather pay a bit more, because it's about balance, isn't it? They'd rather pay a bit more and have a chain-free property and say it's going to be a deal that's done like an exchange in XYZ dates. Or they're going to turn around and say, this is 3 months, 4 months down the road, I'm going to put all this money into the property and probably get no joy at all. This is where auctions and the method of sale through auction is absolutely amazing, because 9 times out of 10, the properties that we are selling are vacant property and they only require cash buyers. Now, I had an interesting question on that during the week this week from a client. And that question was that, can you purchase a property by having a mortgage? And the answer is yes, you can, providing you've got all your ducks in a row and you decide that you can have your survey, because there's nothing stopping people having a survey done or a valuation done or anything that they want on a property that is vacant and is an auction. Providing you're set and ready for the time of the auction, you should be in a position to go. If, however, you feel that you can't quite make it, always speak to the auctioneer. It may be that our seller may sell prior to auction, but give you a longer period of completion time. So actually nothing is impossible at all. But yes, auction always kind of is one of the reasons why a lot of investors, a lot of buyers, a lot of builders, a lot of developers, all of these guys go into buying a property because they can actually deal with it and buy it there and then, as opposed to waiting for someone to vacate. So, there's no reason why you can't purchase a property through auction, providing you get the right advice and the right guidance. You can make that happen. But the reason why people do like to buy property that is vacant is primarily time and money. Both are valuable. Time because it takes you there. So those that are buying a house as opposed to a home are buying it on the basis of a buy-to-let, or a block of flats that's causing some sort of investment, or another way. Those people are not buying a home. They are not attached emotionally. They don't really care to a large extent, as long as it does what it says on the tin, and it makes the kind of money, and the investment and the returns are there to get. They will look at that. So they don't mind the time, because from their point of view, that longevity might give them the time to put the money together, structure their finances the way they want to, and maybe they might be remortgaging, refinancing another property that they're taking the money out of in order to buy that. So there are two distinct differences between a home and a house. And yes, the home is what people want to buy chain-free. Now, when you mention the areas, Paul, I mean, those areas are all, in my mind, pretty much university territories. And the reason why people want to buy those areas as chain-free is, again, time constraint. Because the child or the children are going to go and attend a university at a given time, and they don't want to be sitting on a hope and a prayer that they might get the digs or the rental accommodation or whatever they're going to get in the time. Or also, some parents look at it as a wise investment and say, well, actually, my kid's going to be there for 3 years, and I'm going to pay someone else's rent. So I might as well buy a vacant property, which my child can actually be in, because that's part of my family investment, and probably 3 other people, that they could share with. And actually, they will end up collectively paying for the value of the property. So they prefer to buy a chain-free property, which means that they can actually time all of the terms, university terms, and probably keep it and let it be on. So I just felt that the towns that you had mentioned, to a large extent, your research or the research that was done, were primarily towns that were our university, and having a university child myself at the moment, I know that, time and getting them all in and moving them in at the time and loading your truck in and taking their stuff in and out is challenges. So sometimes people just say, okay, well, I'd rather buy a place and keep them here. So I think those are fundamentally the reasons why people would prefer to buy a chain-free property. That's not to say that, and so there are other areas. Sorry, I know I sound going on about this, but I just thought I'd cover the points that are raised. And so the other side of it is there are asset management companies who, in history, not so much now, but historically used to come along and say, we'll buy your house and break the chain. And the reason they buy their house and break the chain is the chances are that their value, as I said, that actually in the last 3 months, house prices at that particular Acacia Avenue, for argument's sake, has gone up by 5 or 10%. And the chances are that if you have a vacant property, you could probably actually get a bit more. So, it is a combination of the right mechanism. So there are asset management companies that out there will buy a property and sell on. And of course, like asset management companies, there are so many companies, and I'm sure you've seen it, a bit like we buy any car type, we buy any house, we buy, for cash. They buy those for cash primarily because they also know that they can buy them at a lower price and sell them at the market price and above. So there's always a reason why such things exist. But my answer to majority of those would be that, if you want to sell and sell quick, auction is a great method. But otherwise, yes, they do like and prefer chain-free homes.
I mean, it's challenging, isn't it, to see or to try and estimate what you think the premium is likely to be, because you obviously don't want to price it too high to deter buyer interest and then just have it sat on the market because it's too expensive. But at the same time, there is a value to having a quick and painless property purchase. I mean, just looking at some of the figures here, so Swansea is 25,000 is the suggested premium that people will pay, but in Nottingham it's 51,000. So, and as we heard earlier, Edinburgh, people pay up to 75,000 over the top for a chain-free purchase. So it's a tricky one. But I guess talking to your agent, they'll have a feel for how these things work in their area, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely, and they'll know. They'll have ready-made buyers. I mean, especially if it's a popular road, a popular location. It's close to schools, it's accessible from a communication point of view, and of course it has great hot internet speed. As we know, that is also a reason why people will pay more money if they can do that, especially when they've been working from home. So there's a lot of reasons that make these things accountable. And those that know that those houses sell really well, they sell quite quickly, and they'll sell at a premium. And so those people want them vacant because they need to know that chain is going to be broken. And some people will pay extra, So you've got to look at the other side of the coin, which is probably a question that you're going to raise with me, and that is do they sell and rent? And that is an area that is huge, and people do take that gamble because they want the certainty of the sale. And if they've got good money for it, if they've had a good premium for it in the first place, they probably will take the decision to go rent because they've got enough in there for the rental of a year at least in their markup of the property. And then they can sell, and they are also in a position, it's a double whammy really, they're actually in a good position to be able to turn around and say, I can make you a better offer on a property that they go to, because all of a sudden they've got their chain free too as buyers.
Indeed. Let's move on to the second story, which is the Nationwide Building Society's newly released Local Affordability Report. Catchy title, but basically this is the latest information of where you should buy if you're looking for the best value in terms of wherever the regions of the country you're thinking about, and where perhaps you shouldn't. So the least affordable place to buy in the UK, not surprisingly, the London Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Now, basically how they do this is by the what they call the HPER, the house price to earnings ratio. So the price of the property as a multiple of wages in the area. So if you want to buy a house in Kensington and Chelsea, the house is 14.7 times your average annual income in that area. So that's the most expensive place in terms of affordability. Oxford comes in second. That's gone up by 14% in the last year. People want to move to Oxford, it seems. 10 times average earnings in that region, and one of the strongest increases in the whole of the southeast. Southwest, Cotswolds, obviously, Bath, Somerset, all that area, 8.6 multiple of your salary. I think places like Cirencester, Tetbury and Moreton in the Marsh, very desirable. Rutland, if you go up to the East Midlands and the West Midlands and the Malvern Hills. And the least affordable area in the northwest, right up there, is, not surprisingly, Cumbria, around where the lakes are, of course, Lake Windermere, Ambleside, those kind of places. In Wales, interestingly, Cardiff used to be the most expensive place to buy in terms of affordability, but now it's the Vale of Glamorgan, which includes places like Barry Island, 17% increase this year. And in Scotland, of course, it's Edinburgh, needless to say, that runs the roost there. If we look at the most affordable areas to buy, East Ayrshire in Scotland, not surprisingly, probably 3 groats and a sheep up there, I would imagine. That's probably being very rude to the people of East Ayrshire. I probably should retract that. don't want them having to go at us. Areas at the south of Glasgow, Kilmarnock and Cumnock. But then when we come down to, in Wales, it's Merthyr Tydfil. In the West Midlands, around Stoke-on-Trent. Great Yarmouth in Norfolk as we come down the east coast. Swindon in the southwest is the most affordable area in the southwest, 5.4 multiple of income rather. And then you've got Southampton, which has replaced Dover as the most affordable region in the southeast at 5.6 times your salary. So Southampton is one of the cheapest areas. And lastly, if you want to come into a London borough, you need to think about Bromley because it's 7.4 times your income, which is interestingly exactly half of what it cost is to live in Kensington and Chelsea. So perhaps some good value there in Bromley, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, Bromley has expanded more and more recently. I've seen sort of the boroughs of Bromley and then the outskirts of Kent, all of that beginning to sort of creep up, but more affordable, still being connected by the underground in some places and some of the mainline train stations that bring them into the nearest underground. So it's all about connectivity. Not that connectivity is the current trend, because obviously having just gone through the pandemic time, few years, people have obviously felt that they want to stay at home, even though we don't now no longer need to work from home, according to the statistics this week, or the ruling. But people have got used to that, and they like the idea of that flexibility, and they feel that, what am I racing into town for when I can actually sit here and do the same job? Occasionally it's good to go in, but not all the time. So all of those things have made it more challenging for people to decide where they want them to live. But Bromley and some other parts of Kent, outskirts of London, are still affordable. But even at 7 times income, Paul, that's a lot of money. So what is the average income? The average income, I think, is bordering somewhere between 25 and 30,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And so what are you actually really going to get at 30,000 pounds with 7 times your income? Those are the challenges. And will you find a property for 150, 160, 200,000 pounds in some of those? Yes, you will. There are flats and properties available that come into those areas. But yes, South Kensington and Kensington itself, I think one of the richest properties in London was recently named in a street called Tiny Street. I think probably, I can't remember the name, but it's something very easy to say. At, I think, around £20 million for a little pad in that particular location. So yes, I mean, it's a far cry, isn't it, from 200,000 to 20 million? But it is possible within that circle. North, definitely, there is a variety. I'm surprised at Southampton slipping into an affordable area over Dover. But Southampton, has been doing really, really well over the years, and actually really isn't that far, but has the university, has the ports, and quite modern by comparison to a lot of places I've been fortunate to visit. So if you can afford and you can just about get into Southampton, it's not a bad location, area wise. And of course, you've got places like Ringwood and the New Forest, which is very desirable, all within that circle.
Mm, absolutely. It's probably worth, and perhaps the reason for choosing this story this week is to revisit the discussion around the what I find difficult to understand is how we ever ended up in this situation. Because if you think about things like the utilities and so on, the costs of those are uniform across the country. If I'm using the same energy company for my property in Farnham compared to living up in the north, the cost is the same. The unit cost of the energy is the same. And many other of the costs that you associate with buying property are the same. It's the same interest rate with that building society, whether you bought the property in Manchester or in London. But somehow with the house prices, we seem to have this huge disparity. And here, London, nearly 3 times more or less affordable than the Northeast, which is the cheapest place to buy. So if I'm looking at the North prices, and I have looked at them recently just as for the purpose of this discussion, telling you earlier on about fantastic 4-bedroom properties, large with 2 receptions and a fantastic conservatory on about 289,000. That would be double that in the South. And what is the rationale for continuing to buy in the South, Joe, from your point of view, from a professional point of view, as opposed to saying, well, do you know what, I can get so much more up north, I'm just going to up sticks and go?
To be honest with you, it's the bright lights of the big city, the big smoke, and that's been the historical thing forever. And take that point in any country you like. Just to take it away from here for a second, imagine living in Russia, for argument's sake, just plucked a country out of the blue here, and so Moscow is and St. Petersburg and all that is hugely expensive. I mean, it's beyond most people's aspirations to even think about buying a property in such places. Yet, on the outskirts, you can buy anything you like for tuppence. It's just nobody wants to be there, and the part of that reason is that as generations go, some people have moved on, and the new younger generation are always attracted by the bright lights of the city, the buzz, the work, the social aspect, the whole caboodle. That is what tends to keep pushing them. So every city that we talk about in a general way, but it's the cities that do okay, but it's the out towns that don't do okay, and that's had a slight reversal during the pandemic, because all of a sudden everybody thought about space and not actually the convenience. They thought, I can do this. I can move on the outskirts as opposed to living bang in the middle of London. But every time you look at this, everywhere I've seen, next generation comes along, it's about where they're making their wealth. It's about where they're making their home. It's about their community, their communication, everywhere. And I look back, and even as an Asian person, Southall is an area that every Asian person pretty much congregated in when they first landed at Heathrow. Why? Because they were akin to their own. They were family and friends there, or somebody of a member of a family whose friend was a friend who lived there. So they felt happier and comfortable knowing someone. And so that was always an attraction. Yet you look at places like Southall, which are now but every generation, and I can go through probably 5 generations there now, have all moved around because of the convenience and the connectivity. And that is no different out in the sticks. If I put Spain on the table for a second, as British people, we always say, this is that. But in Spain alone, there are, English communities that get together. They're happier in their own environment, and that is just a connectivity that
Mm.
happens everywhere. So the bright lights of a city are the attraction because it makes people feel safer. Communication is easier. If you're coming into the country, traveling in the middle of, I don't know, Buxton, for argument's sake, which is, a lovely place, but nothing around you. So how are you going to do? Catch a bus, do a train. There's no neighbors, There's a time of life when we want that. But as a generation, a younger generation, they want to start with the bright lights and
Mm.
be able to make their living and set their life standards and then gradually move out. So our structure in this country is such that you come in, you start there, you have a family, and then you start thinking about moving a bit further out, and all the other things start to sort of add up and make you think, right, I need to do this, as opposed to, but when you're on your own as a single person, then the bright lights of a city are very attractive, and that's where that disparity happens. But interestingly enough, what you're saying about utilities and the costs and so forth, it does make me think sometimes that how it is that a builder or a developer is going to build a property at a certain square footage, pounds per square footage, and it's pretty much across the board. And labour has become a little bit more challenging in the sense that people working, especially in craft industry, be it a plumber, be it a electrician, carpenter, all of these things have become very specific trades, and they are now getting expensive because the next generation isn't going to those trades. So those people, those tradespeople are coming in from other countries in order
Mm.
to be able to do the jobs. Because our people in the UK are sort of, okay, well, I can sit on my butt and go and do this, that, the other, and why should I go and do, the other job? So that's where the problem is. But the cost of all of those is still pretty much the same, be it in the north and be it in the south. But the profit in the north is not as good as being in the south. So
Mm.
that is another reason why people are attracted to the bright lights of London and the south, because they think, okay, well, if I'm going to put the same time and energy into building or buying a property, I may as well buy that down there and travel and take my workforce um, and provide accommodation for them because I'm going to actually make a bigger profit.
Mm. But I guess the cost of the land is cheaper in the north than it is here.
Yes, it is. So even if you look at the cost of the land and cost of the building work, predominantly the value is always a third, a third, and a third. So third cost of the land, third cost of the building, and third cost of the profit. But if you look at the building work, to build a 1,500 square
Mm.
foot house, the land may only cost you 50,000 or 100,000, but the build cost doesn't really
Yeah,
change.
it's uniform, isn't it?
But
Yeah.
but then what doesn't work well is the profit. So you can't. So the land side might be you might make the money because you bought the land cheaper, but it's far cry from the profits you would make in another area. So those are the attractions in my mind that brings people. And like I said, connectivity is huge, and that just doesn't mean one connectivity. That's about everything: trains, road, rail network. All of that is very, very important.
Final story this week. Price of detached homes has risen by almost 14% in the last year, compared to just 5.6% for flats. So says the government's house price index. So it prompts the question, naturally, Joe, whether flats are currently undervalued and therefore an investment opportunity. Overall prices have risen by 10%, as we know, in the year to November 2021. That's up from 9.8% in November. This amounts to around £40,000 worth of cash in real terms. So the appetite for the larger homes, which we've talked about, the whole race for space thing, continues to drive the market. detached homes have grown by 13.9%, more than double that of flats over the past year. So the average house price, 270,708. And the suggestion is that the smart money is picking up these flats cheap. Is that what you're experiencing, Joe?
Yes. So the reason why I think there's been a slow uptake on the flats is primarily for the race for space. That's that last couple of years have made people, especially family people, think about where they need to be. The problem we have in the UK is that we are an island, and unfortunately restricted by greenbelt, waterways, farms, and rivers, and all sorts of others. Our space that we actually are allowed to build on is quite small by comparison to the size of the country. And so over the last 15 years, 20 years, flats have become more popular than they probably ever were before. I started out this in the early sort of 1980s. It was always a 3-bed semi or a terrace that was the desired property. Freehold over leasehold was far more desired. So flats was not the thing, but the generations, the millennials, as you would call them, Paul, are interested in doing bugger all to the properties like our parents were or we were. They're just interested in accessibility and ease. So to target that audience, the developers built a lot of flats. And also to accommodate the fact that we don't have the space. You can either go up or you can go down. And if you traveled around London and you just use the A4, M4 corridor, how that has transformed in our eyes in our time. It's almost, driving through an American state with all the tall towers and the brights and the lights and so forth. You almost think that you could be somewhere else in the world, but it's taken years and years and years of people to sort of think that I can actually, and councils and our way of thinking and our desires to get those towers up. And if you go into the city in places like Canary Wharf and so forth, it's just the norm. I mean, it's just became, Tower City. And that's because there was a desire and a demand from the millennials and from younger generation and from accessibilities and having a pied-à-terre in the city as opposed to not. So at the moment, because of the pandemic, the desire for detached homes or semi-detached properties or terrace houses was way, way higher than actually for flats, because you don't have the garden and you don't have the space to sort of go out and sounds silly, but even to have a cigarette, if you don't have a balcony, you've literally, unless you don't mind opening your window and you live in it, but if you were in a someone's flat or you rented it or even maybe some sort of hotel, you literally got to get yourself ready, get dressed. I mean, so if you're a regular smoker, as an example, every time you want to have a fag and you're on the fifth floor of some hotel, you've got to literally go all the way down, stand outside to have a cigarette, because otherwise you've contravened their structure or not. But if you're an avid smoker, what are you going to do? Every 20 minutes, you're going to put your pajamas on and you're going to leg it downstairs to have a fag and come back up again. So there are a lot of reasons why things like that, and having people sitting at home during the pandemic, I think there were probably a lot of people going up and down the lifts and stairs, and it's sod's law at that time the lifts break down, so you've got to walk up and down the stairs, and if you are a smoker, then of course you're going to be out of breath pretty quick going up and down. It's almost determined to say give up smoking and have a life, but you can't change that. It's a habit, and it's what becomes. I'm just using that as an example. I'm not having to go at smokers. I'm just saying that those are the examples that turns around and says that people then look at flats and think, oh, I don't want to do that. But yes, they are a good investment. Yes, they will come back up, and yes, I think investors will pick them up much, much cheaper, because there's always a huge market for rental. And so the rental market is mostly in flats, and they're not so much in the house, because the people that are renting for convenience. They're not interested in having a massive yard and so forth. Detached houses per se have obviously increased in value, because we have a system. It's ironic that you bring this subject on, because it was one that was in my mind to talk about, and it's a system that we have. We start with our sort of studios and one-bedroom flats, rising up to two, perhaps into a terraced, end of terraced, and so forth. And ultimately, when we have a detached property, it doesn't matter how detached it is, even if it's detached by 6 inches or a meter, the fact that it is a detached house is almost an arrival of you as a person. You say, well, I've made it now. I'm now living in a detached house. And the other parts of having a detached house is always the issue for neighbours, because you obviously can't choose your neighbours. It could be someone that is next door, and you're attached to them, and they just choose to drill, and put their picture frame up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and so that causes issues and challenges. And before you know, you fall out with them, and the next thing you know, you just don't want to live there anymore. So there's a lot of reasons why people actually look at the detached. The last one I'm going to say is always extensions. Now, the problem with modern detached houses is they've actually maximized them. They do them to the max anyway. But in the older ones, they always had room to grow. They had room to extend, either whether they're going into the loft or they're going to actually put a double-story extension around the back, or a single-story, or on the side. They had a garage. They want to go up. They had growth space. That was how they were designed. But every modern house is designed to the max, including the loft. So one of the issues that always comes is storage of a property, and you'll probably appreciate that when you're living in a property that has a loft space, and you can bung a load of stuff up in the loft, or maybe a garage at the back of the garden. But if you don't have a garage and you don't have a loft, it's all going to go into the house, into the space that you got, and that makes it difficult to have. So detached houses is always coming and arriving and saying, well, I've made it now, so I'm there. But there are many other reasons why people look at that.
They're suggesting that it's those with a mortgage that are driving the price growth, because obviously for the first year of lockdown, people were saving a great deal of money, so people were bolstered by additional savings that they'd made. And they just looked at the opportunity, well, we've got this extra money we didn't expect to have. Borrowing rates are low, so I'll see if I can get just that little bit more and push our expectations up with the mortgage offer, so that they can actually go and look for a 3 or 4 bedroom property, or a detached property, rather than going for what they would have gone for had we not have had a lockdown. So it's interesting that the buyers with a mortgage are the people driving this, it says in the report, and the fact that they have that extra savings, they're bolstered by a strong jobs market, they're bolstered by the fact that there's low interest rates. Although, ironically, this did come out, and let's just turn the conversation slightly, because this did come out on the same day that UK inflation was announced at a 30-year high of 5.4%, which was, of course, the big story from last week. So there may well be a little sting in the tail here. I know there is affordability when they check people for mortgages now. They have to be able to prove that they can afford it to a certain level and all that kind of thing. But we are going to see a year of some financial turbulence. And I did read yesterday that many European finance ministers are looking to the UK to see just how we handle this explosion that's going to happen on 1st of April, with the utility bills going up 50%, and the other tax rises that, of course, the Chancellor has hidden in the budget for the last year or so, which all hit on the 1st of April. And the suggestion is that at least another £600 is going to be required in the year for the family budget. So there is some headwinds there, isn't there? And who knows what's going to happen in terms of, well, certainly inflation's going to go up. I think, the bank rate's going to go up probably next month, I would imagine. But they've shown also that they're not shy of doing it, because they did it in December when everyone thought they'd be doing it in January. So they're not shy of putting the rate up. So there could be some problems ahead.
And interesting that they did do that in December. It didn't actually put the brakes on anyone to a large extent. And I think, in all honesty, I think the country is kind of ready and prepared for all of what is about to be thrown upon them as time goes on. They know that they've had to deal with things in a different way over the last couple of years. And yes, they have saved money, and yes, people will, find the money. And yes, the only problem is the ones that never got those. They're the ones that will suffer the greatest on this. But these people that are able to go and buy detached houses and have a bigger deposit and so forth has been due to the fact that they've made savings. They made family savings, Paul. You know, people were not going out weekly as before, and they saw more money coming back into the system. And so they utilized that in order to get up or move out of the area and find better value for money. So I don't think any of that is going to be a huge surprise. For the Europeans to watch and see that, it is a different story in Europe because home ownership in the United Kingdom is probably the highest out of most of the European places. And Europeans spend their life living in rented accommodation most of the time. So there is a very, very different story that would be, in fact, we would be happier to watch how they handle, because all of a sudden, all these people that are paying rent may not be able to meet their demands, but they have no equity, no skin in the game. Whereas we have skin in the game here. So when somebody has bought a property, they've already put a certain amount of money down as a deposit. So let's just take £100,000 as an example. You know, if you're going to borrow 90% or 75% of that, you've got 25 grand of skin in the game. You know, you put money into that, and the chances are that is a level of security. But in Europe, what level of security is there when actually you might pay a month's rent in advance and the rest of it is there? There is no skin in the game. There's nothing for them to sort of look back on. So I think when you look at the comparisons, they will be very, very different in my opinion. However, as far as we're concerned here, I think most people are kind of expecting and are kind of prepared, as long as they are not dramatic and drastic, and small points of interest are probably been expected for way longer, and it's still, you know, cheap money to borrow by comparison to what it is. The guy that really suffers out of it, majority of the cases, is the guy that's got some money and is sitting in there on a deposit and not earning tremendous amount of interest. But everybody else is pretty happy with it.
Yes, I mean, they're saying here you can still get fixed rates below 1.5% even at the moment. So we're a long way away from double-digit mortgage rates, which we've seen in the past. And you know, it would be prudent, wouldn't it, to do some sensible financial sums before committing to larger purchases than perhaps you might ought to take on, given what the headwinds that we're looking at from April the 1st. I would suggest.
Caution is the thing. There's no question in my mind that one should suggest caution in every way. I'm not trying to say be frugal or go out there and spend and do what you want to do, but you just got to be careful and be cautious about your outgoings. And utilities have gone crazy. You know, utilities are amazing. I can tell you that, you know, our own gas and electric bills have gone through the roof by comparison. And they're likely to go even further, according to all the providers. But the question is why? You know, it is yet here we are, a nation who is turning around and saying to everybody, and like everybody else after the Glasgow summit, you know, let's go electric. And yet our electric costs are going through the roof. So people aren't going to be really that happy to have electric heaters and things, and put a whole world, all their eggs in one basket, and become electric. You know, when gas central heating is probably more prudent. They're not going to get electric cars. You'll be having traffic jams at electric stations because they won't have enough electric, or the electric cost will be going up. So I think they got to really think about this target. I think that's more lip service, to be honest with you, than anything else. That, you know, we'll do this. Just it's an impossible reality. So the utilities are going up, and if you buy an electric car, you know, your electrics are going to shoot through the roof unless you start doing solar panels. But even with solar panels, unfortunately, we are not blessed with lots of sun every year. So you've got to just wish and pray that somebody else does something else for you. So it's not all as rosy as they say. And you know, I know it sounds, you know, but everything in proportion. I think bite-sized pieces across the way, a bit of electric, a bit of gas, and a bit of diesel is not going to kill everybody.
So now we've offended the people of East Ayrshire, the millennials, and now the green people.
Well, the green people are living in just, it's just.
I think we'll leave it there, Joe. And on that bombshell, as they say on one well-known motoring program, thank you very much indeed for your wisdom as always, Joe. Thank you very much for watching. Even.
Well.
Thanks for your washing as well. I enjoyed that. Thanks for watching. We're out of time as always. We could talk for hours about these subjects, as you well know, and one day we might be allowed to do so. But for now, we must say goodbye, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks for watching.